Interestingly, there doesn't appear to be any degradation in embryo quality or risks of the embryos when they're with prolonged storage, because they're stored in liquid nitrogen, so very, very cold. So basically, all sort of cellular processes stop and they're in suspended animation. So the reason for reconsenting is not because of concerns over the duration that the embryos are in there from a health of the embryo perspective.
Check that's empty.
So for freezing eggs and embryos, there used to be a slow freezing process, so it took quite a long time to freeze. But now the eggs or embryos are plunged into liquid nitrogen. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but essentially they're plunged into liquid nitrogen, and then they snap freeze, so they freeze very, very quickly. And the survival rate of embryos and eggs that have been snap frozen with this process called vitrification, which essentially means turning to glass. I mean, they just turn to a glassy state straight away. The survival rate is significantly higher than it was beforehand when we used to routinely use slow freezing.
Oh, it's really stuck.
For embryos, the main issues are more at the time of freezing the embryos or thawing the embryos. So that is when there can be a drop away. And for instance, some embryos don't survive the freezing and the thawing, so the beginning and end of the whole process. But during it, when the embryos are stored, sometimes I liken it a bit like to being on a long haul aeroplane flight, and there might not be a lot happening in the middle bit, and all the action is at the beginning of the end in general. Interestingly, an embryo doesn't have to completely survive thawing to still be a viable embryo. So embryos can actually partially survive thawing and still go on to fully implant and to become completely healthy babies. And I guess really the way of looking at that is embryos can split into identical twins, and obviously they're still completely viable. So it's not that a whole embryo has to survive.
Wipe that off for you if you want.
The reason I think the 55 years was chosen was that potentially you can freeze. It's not so much for embryos, but you could freeze eggs and sperm maybe from biopsies of children. And so obviously you want to be able to keep the gametes, the eggs and the sperm, stored for long enough so that to see them through their reproductive life. Someone who's making embryos when they're 35 years old, realistically, is not going to be keeping them stored for 55 years.
There we go. Hold up.
So it really is an amazing gift for people to do that. Now in the UK though, for people who are looking at being an embryo donor, they need to meet the same criteria as would people who are acting as an egg and a sperm donor. So in the UK, egg donors need to be 35 years old or less, and men need to be less than 45 years. And also they need to have genetic screening, infection screening. So there's quite a few hurdles, and no family history of any concerning diseases that might be being passed along.